Hi everyone. I want to read another extract from my book, The Reason to Write. Before I read it, I want to read out what I've written in the prelims, or rather quoted in the prelims, from our dear family friend, Doris Lessing. And it does no harm to repeat as often as you can. Without me, the literary industry would simply not exist. The publishers, the agents, the sub-agents and the sub-sub-agents, the accountants and the libel lawyers, the departments of literature, the professors, the theses, the books of criticism, the reviewers, the book pages, all this vast proliferating edifice is all because of this small, patronized, put down and underpaid person. That's written by Doris Lessing. In the times I've got to know famous people, I found it difficult to square their public persona with the way they really are. When I was young and living at Langton House, Doris Lessing was one of so many who turned up at the weekends. She liked to work in the herb garden most of all, and was often found there making potpourri. Doris didn't stick out in any way at all. She dressed in a kind of understated way, drove a battered old Volkswagen and conversed quietly. Her favourite subjects were gardening, Africa, storytelling and cats. She always struck me as someone who relished life at Langton House because when there she could be herself. I liked spending time with Doris because she was sensible, not in an obvious way, but in a way that might be called profound. When Doris told you something, you know full well it had been uttered after careful thought. More often than not, I got the sense that her mind was always grinding away, and that in conversation she tossed in handfuls of ideas and conclusions prepared earlier. Never once can I remember Doris saying anything on which she hadn't mused long and hard. As I grew older, I discovered Doris had a life outside Langton House. Of course she did. The mind of a child makes sense of what it sees and knows, and that's what my mind strained to do. Gaps in what I knew were simply filled in with invention, which is why the way children think is the default setting of us all. In my teens, I would often get a lift up to London with Doris when she was on her way back from Langton to West Hampstead. We would talk about Africa and about travelling, about stories and about Nasruddin. On one journey, as we jolted forward through nose-to-tail traffic in South London, Doris ended a long silence with the words, "You know, I was at your naming ceremony." "Where was it?" I asked. "At Coombe Springs, a few months before your parents moved to Langton House. I remember the date. It was the 21st of March, 1967, she said, when Safia and you were 4 months old." "On Nowruz, Afghan New Year. Yes, that's right. Who else was there?" Doris thought for a moment. Quite a long list of luminaries. Her eyes widened at the memory. There was Russell Page and Robert Graves and dozens of others, all of them quite extraordinary in their own right. "Do you remember anything from the ceremony?" I asked. Doris fell silent, her mind scrolling back through more than 20 years. "Yes, I do," she said. "Your father wore a magnificent robe over his shoulders, presented to him by King Ibn Saud. He quoted passages from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam and from Rumi's masterpiece, the Masnavi. Prayers were spoken and thanks were given for the life you were about to have. You were both named, and then something remarkable happened." "What?" "Your father touched a hand to your forehead and announced you would be protected throughout your life by your sense of humor, the kind contained in the wisdom of Mullah Nasruddin." "My suit of armor," I mumbled. "The one," he said, "would always shield me from danger and injustice." Like me, Doris savoured conversation, following the thread of an idea, teasing it out, and seeing where it led. A voracious reader, she had a vast knowledge ready and waiting to be harnessed, an inspiration in a deep down way. She expected others to work as hard as she did herself. The secret of success is applying oneself, she once told me, not in a mediocre way, but as though your life depended on it. Most people fear hard work or are just simply too lazy for it. I feel for them because they have no idea of the joy it brings. From time to time, we'd meet somewhere unexpectedly and take up right away where we had left off. On a handful of occasions, I saw Doris outside in the bear pit of stardom. At best, it was uncomfortable to witness, and at worst, it was like having one's teeth pulled out. I watched as this quiet, private woman that I knew and loved was overwhelmed by seething, frenzied crowds of fans. One memory springs to mind. We happened to be in San Francisco at the same time. I was on my way back to Tokyo, and she was speaking at a literary event. Many hundreds of people from the Bay Area and far beyond had packed into a huge auditorium. Most were clutching well-thumbed copies of their favorite Lessing novels. Some wore t-shirts that blared, "I love Doris even more than you." I bustled into the green room where Doris was sitting alone with a cup of weak milk tea. As soon as she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Take me somewhere with you," she said. "You mean outside, to a cafe, somewhere like that?" "No, there's no time." "So where?" "Let's go somewhere in our imagination," she said. So we did. We chatted about the scent of the first rain on African soil and how people in Harare dress up to go to Sunday church. We laughed about the foolishness of publishers and how the same object or idea can be seen differently along one's own journey of life. Then, sipping her milky tea, Doris said, "You will be a great writer, but only if you remember not to be like them." Them? The others. Which others? The ones who write for the wrong reasons. What reasons? For publicity and fame, for attention and glory. "Doris, why do you write?" I asked. "Because I can't stop. It's a fountain inside me, a fountain that can't be turned off, or at least I haven't found a way to control it," she said. "So it gushes and gushes like something out of the Arabian Nights. I summon it and I have shaped it over time. If I stop writing, the fountain's water would get higher and higher and it would drown me." "But would you ever stop writing?" I asked. "I don't think so. You see, it gives me great pleasure." "How?" I asked her. "By allowing me to take a lump of clay and to shape it. I do it out of curiosity as much as anything else. Taking a handful of characters, I put them into a situation and I watch how they react." I fluttered a hand towards the auditorium. "What about that?" Doris huffed in boredom. "I write for myself," she answered. "I don't do it for anyone else. I suggest you grasp the bull by the horns and dive in. Keep writing, even when you're down. Don't wait for people to praise you. Hone your style and observe yourself from above as you move ahead. Experiment with ideas and in the way you present them. Of course, use an audience as your sounding board, but remember who you're writing for." "For myself." "Yes, that's it. For you and no one else, just as your father and grandfather did. To keep on track, you have to write, and not listen to anyone who holds you back. Put out work the way you want it to be and not because you're getting a big fat advance for it. Advances are all well and good for paying the gas bill, but they're blood money paid by the imbecile order." "The imbecile order?" "The imbecile order of publishers." Again, Doris huffed. "They can all go to hell," she growled. "Find me another vocation in which so-called professionals are as incapable as they are in the publishing business. Most of them don't have a clue. They're all Bertie Woosters." "Maybe they're secretly Nasruddins," I chirped in. Doris balked. "I wish it was so," she replied. "At least then they'd be wise fools. The reason to write.